are certain heroes you expect to see on the X-Men like Gambit, Rogue, Professor X, Wolverine, Storm, but then there are non-mutants, villains, and what even is that? While not naturally born, this Spider-Girl made a single appearance in Avenging Spider-Man in issue number 16. She had similar powers to Spider-Man but was made of a combination of spider and mutant DNA by the Jackal, who used materials found in Mr. Sinister's lab. Honestly, the things you could probably make with materials found in Mr. Sinister's lab. As such, she also had the additional powers to shapeshift into a giant spider with 5 human eyes. While in this shape, she also had the power to spit purple mucus and even fire optic blasts from her eyes. Makes you think there might be some Summers DNA mixed somewhere in there. I know, that's what I'm thinking. She ended up rampaging across the city after the Jackal released her as part of a test. Fortunately, she was apprehended by Superior Spider-Man and the X-Men, who explained that she seemed to be a mutant and ended up taking her in after, of course, defeating her. We never really heard anything about her after that though, so who knows where she is. Maybe she was on Krakoa. Spider-Girl was created by Christopher Yost and Paco Medina. Spiral has been an enemy of the X-Men but would also become a member of Storm and Psylocke's X-Force team. She was a human known as Rita Hayward who would end up in the Mojoverse and become part of a time paradox, having been attacked by her future mutated self, Spiral. She was a stunt woman who ended up falling in love with Longshot during his time on Earth and returned with him to the Mojoverse. When his plan to defeat Mojo tragically failed, Rita was captured and was modified by Mojo to have 6 arms, one of which was completely cybernetic. Spiral herself is part cyborg, part human mutate as a result of the modifications performed on her. She can also do magic by dancing around, that's a thing she can do. She was the one responsible acting as an agent of Mojo for giving Psylocke her cybernetic eyes as well. Ariel hails from the Coconut Grove, an extraterrestrial planet, and possesses the mutant ability of persuasion. Additionally, her alien physiology grants her teleportation capabilities. Notably, she is connected to another Ariel, her ancestor, who actually visited Earth and served as the inspiration for William Shakespeare's play The Tempest. Yes, that Ariel. The Ariel we're focusing on here, though, not her predecessor, arrived on Earth on a mission to gather mutant samples for study, as her people were intrigued by Earth's mutants' evolutionary processes. During her stay on Earth, she became associated with the Fallen Angels and would later cross paths with the X-Men in San Francisco, back when they were in San Francisco, joining them temporarily. If or when the Fallen Angels return, I think it could be cool to have like a deep cut like Ariel make an appearance next time around. I don't know if we'll ever see the Fallen Angels again. I kinda hope we do. You know? I think I'm ready for another Fallen Angel series actually. I'm ready to try again. Let's try again, shall we? While Candy wasn't necessarily a member, she did help the X-Men and made her first appearance in X-Men issue number 31 in the 60s. Candy Southern was a longtime friend of Angel's and would later end up dating Warren. She would also team up with the X-Men to help find Warren when he went missing after learning of the fellow mutant team's existence and Warren Worthington III's role as hero, Angel. Candy would later break up with Warren and was killed by X-Factor enemy and former friend Cameron Hodge. Cameron Hodge, another villain that I feel like we do not talk about enough, but who is terrible. Candace Southern wasn't a mutant and didn't have any powers, but she was skilled in business. So I can see why her and Angel hit it off actually. I would love to see her somehow be resurrected and return to the comics in, I don't know, in an X-Corp series let's say. I thought maybe she might return in the previous one, but I don't remember seeing Candy there. That previous X-Corp series was so short-lived, oh, tragic. Beak's mutation ended up being slightly more unfortunate in comparison to some of the other more well-known core members of the X-Men team. Beak is Barnal Bohusk, and his mutant powers are simply that he looks and shares similar attributes to a bird. His bones are hollow and light, meant to lend well to flying, and he has feathers which should also help him to fly, and yet he's not a very good flyer. In fact, initially Beak couldn't fly at all when he first appeared. Now he can, but he still has to work really hard to do that, and even then he can only fly for short distances typically. Other than that, Beak simply can see better than most at a long range, and is armed with talons and a beak which he can of course use to fight with. But for the most part, Beak simply looks like a bird and as such is usually more on the sidelines than in the middle of the action. He did for a while have a suit however that enhanced his abilities and also granted him additional strength and powers more useful for physical fighting. But for the most part, I feel like Beak's main strong suit is just making friends with everybody. That's kind of what he does. Despite Doop's eccentric nature, his status as a mutant remains unconfirmed. What is Doop? Well, his origin is shrouded in mystery, leaving room for speculation that he could be a mutant, or he could be an alien, or he could be a being from another dimension. We don't really know. The lack of explicit verification makes him a peculiar addition, of course, to this list, although he clearly isn't the only non-mutant to join the X-Men team, as I've already talked about. I mean, like Candy's just a human. Though he might just be one of the quirkiest additions, mutant or not. Doop has engaged in numerous adventures with the X-Men, serving as the receptionist for the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning, working for Wolverine. His presence on Krakoa did suggest that despite the unknown origin in terms of what we know factually in the comics, he really is at home among mutants, emphasizing his enigmatic connection to the mutant world, and possibly suggesting that he is a mutant, but like I said, we don't really know. While Fabio Medina today might be more easily recognized, considering that he's been a part of the very important mutant team known as the Five, which were responsible for resurrecting fallen mutants, when he was known by his former codename of Goldballs, he would have been much less recognizable. Much less. Fabio's powers allow him to produce and shoot, well, gold balls from his body, hence his name, Goldballs, each one firing off with a poink sound. However, since his time as Goldballs, it was more recently revealed during the Dawn of X that the balls that he produced were in actuality unfertile eggs. With this revelation, he took up the name Egg and he became one of the Five, one of the most important mutants on the island nation of Krakoa, as with this newly understood power, he could basically create eggs, which could then be made fertile by the other Five and could be used to regrow and resurrect fallen mutants, so pretty important. So if you haven't heard of Egg or Goldballs, he is a member you'll likely get to know a bit better, I would say, in the modern era. I don't know if he's going to be as relevant in the new era of X-Men comics, but we'll have to wait and see. Amanda Sefton, initially known as Jermaine Zardos, is the adopted sister of Nightcrawler, a mutant and member of the X-Men who adds a layer of unexpected complexity to her relationship with Kurt, as also she is one of his significant love interests. Yeah, that's a thing, you heard me right. The complexity begins when, while adopting the alias Amanda, she ends up investigating Kurt's actions following their brother Steven's death, which was blamed on Kurt. Now, Jermaine assumes the persona of Amanda Sefton during this undercover operation. She's basically trying to figure out what really happened, and she doesn't think that Kurt is fully to blame here. And it's during this period that Kurt ends up developing feelings for her, oblivious, at least initially it seems, to the fact that Amanda is, yes, his adopted sister Jermaine. I don't know how you wouldn't recognize, but I digress. Maybe there's magic involved. Known more commonly as Amanda now in the comics, Jermaine is a formidable sorceress. While not a mutant, she has proven to be a valuable ally to the X-Men, and she was a member of their unofficial Muir Island X-Men team. Mimic is a mutant, but one who gained his abilities after knocking over a beaker accidentally in his father's lab, which caused a chemical reaction that created a strange red gas which he inhaled. His powers allow him to mimic the abilities and skills of other beings within a certain distance of him. Increased exposure to others' abilities seems to also grant him more permanent adaptations of those powers. It wasn't until more recently that it was confirmed that Mimic was in fact a mutant during House of X, as suspected since the 90s. We thought that was a thing, but you know, his origin is kinda weird. Instead, we were led to believe initially that he was a human whose DNA was genetically altered. 'Cause you know, his origins. While not appearing often in the comics, Mimic, aka Calvin Rankin, is a character who has been around since the 1960s and first appeared in X-Men issue number 19, where fans were introduced to him and the question was posed of whether or not Mimic was a mutant or something far worse. Turns out he was a mutant, not something far worse. Mimic is a longtime villain of the X-Men who did for a time play the role of hero and has served on both the heroic X-Men team as well as Norman Osborn's Dark X-Men team during the events of Dark Reign. Despite the fact that Forget-Me-Not is someone you definitely forget, you may have heard us talk about him before on this channel. But for those who have not heard of him or have forgotten him, let me give you a little refresher in terms of who he is. Forget-Me-Not is an X-Men member whose mutant power is that no one can ever remember him, which is why, you know, might be a member of the team that we'd be like, wow, that's surprising because I forgot about him. Get it? His powers make it easier for him to infiltrate places, but it also makes it harder for him to ever connect with anyone, make a friend, or even, have his teammates remember that he is actually on that team because they don't remember who he is. This is why Forget-Me-Not is also usually left off the official rosters for the team, and why you might never really see his name mentioned there ever. Sometimes he'll just pop up and you'll be like, oh, I guess he's on the team, but none of us remembered that. Forget-Me-Not's psychic powers that enable him to go unnoticed and remain forgotten were actually so strong that even Professor Xavier struggled to remember him, and as it was revealed in X-Men Legacy issue number 300, he actually had to place within his mind a psychic hourly reminder just so he wouldn't forget permanently about Forget-Me-Not's existence. Yeah. You know you're powerful when Professor X has to set a psychic timer. That's about it. I'm your host Amanda McKnight. Until next time, you stay nerdy.